Jeep, the symbol of American grit, freedom, and off-road adventure, might be finished. Factories shuttered, thousands of workers fired, and the proud legacy of Made in America hanging by a thread. What happened to Jeep, and how did it come to this? Because this isn't just another corporate restructuring. This is the slow, painful death of one of America's most iconic brands. For decades, Jeep stood as a symbol of power and resilience. Born in the battlefields of World War II, trusted by soldiers, and embraced by millions of Americans who believed their Jeeps could go anywhere. But now, it seems the company that built the Wrangler, the Cherokee, and the Grand Wagoneer is collapsing under its own weight. And the blame? Many are pointing straight at Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares and his obsession with electrification. You see, Stellantis has been on a mission to push every brand under its umbrella toward an all-electric future. Sounds great on paper, right? But here's the problem. Jeep buyers never wanted that. They didn't ask for silent EVs that can't handle the trails or lose power in freezing winters. They wanted the rugged, gas-powered beast that made Jeep legendary. But Stellantis didn't listen. Instead, they poured billions into EV projects like the Jeep Recon and the Wagoneer S, which, by the way, have been complete sales disasters. According to leaked internal memos, Stellantis executives have been meeting behind closed doors for months, discussing cost-cutting measures and production realignment, and just days ago, those discussions turned into reality. Factories across the US have been shut down, entire shifts eliminated, thousands of loyal workers told to pack up and go home. Toledo, Ohio, the heart of Jeep's American manufacturing, is practically in shock. That town lived and breathed Jeep for generations, and now small businesses, restaurants, and auto suppliers in the area are watching their livelihoods vanish overnight. One worker described it best: "It feels like we lost more than a job. We lost a piece of America." And it doesn't stop there. Industry analysts are now warning that Stellantis may be preparing to pull Jeep production out of the US entirely, moving operations to Mexico and Europe, where labor costs are lower and EV regulations are looser. If that happens, Jeep won't just be an American brand anymore. It'll become just another import with an American name slapped on the hood. Lawmakers are furious. Reports suggest some members of Congress are already calling for hearings, accusing Stellantis of betraying American workers while taking billions in tax incentives meant to keep jobs here. But Stellantis' leadership seems unfazed. In a recent statement, Tavares said the company is realigning global resources to ensure sustainable profitability. In plain English, that means they're cutting costs, starting with American jobs. And for the millions of Jeep owners out there, the nightmare might just be beginning. With layoffs, plant closures, and suppliers going under, parts and service delays are skyrocketing. Dealerships across the country are running dry, some even selling their last few Wranglers and Gladiators at fire sale prices just to stay afloat. Owners are now asking, what happens to our warranties? What happens to recalls? What happens to Jeep's future? Because if Stellantis continues down this path, Jeep's resale values could collapse, and the brand could lose the trust of the very customers who kept it alive for generations. But let's step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture, because Jeep's fall isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a much larger collapse across the entire SUV market. Ford is slashing production, GM is cutting back, even Toyota is quietly restructuring its truck lineup as demand shifts and EV uncertainty grows. The once unshakable SUV empire of America is trembling. And Jeep, tragically, is the first to fall. And if Stellantis truly abandons its US roots, this might not just be the end of Jeep, it could be the end of America's off-road legacy itself. Because when you take away the American workers, the factories, and the spirit of adventure that built Jeep, what's left? Just a name, a logo, a ghost of what once was. But the story isn't over yet. The workers are fighting back, communities are organizing, and even some dealers are banding together to demand answers from Stellantis leadership. The question now is, will Stellantis listen, or will they bury Jeep for good? Across the country, the anger is boiling over. From Toledo to Belvedere, thousands of Jeep workers and their families have taken to the streets, demanding answers from Stellantis. Signs reading "Save Our Jobs" and "Keep Jeep in America" are popping up outside shuttered plants, while workers stand in the cold wondering how a company that once prided itself on American grit could abandon them overnight. Local news stations are interviewing tearful employees who've spent 20 or even 30 years on the line, building Wranglers and Cherokees with pride. Many of them say they weren't given any warning. Just an email or a text message from HR announcing that their position has been eliminated. No meetings, no chance to prepare, just gone. It's the kind of betrayal that hits deep, because Jeep wasn't just a brand, it was a lifeline for entire towns. Generations of families worked in those factories. The Jeep badge meant stability, pride, and community. Now those same families are lining up at unemployment offices, and local diners that once served plant workers are closing their doors for good. And while American workers struggle to rebuild their lives, Stellantis executives are celebrating record profits overseas. Reports from France and Italy show that Stellantis has been ramping up operations in Europe, building new EV facilities and hiring foreign workers, all while cutting back in the United States. This is where the political storm begins to brew. Several US lawmakers are calling for a full federal investigation into Stellantis' actions, accusing the automaker of taking American tax breaks and then outsourcing jobs abroad. One senator even called it economic betrayal, saying that Jeep's collapse is a national tragedy disguised as corporate strategy. And that phrase, corporate strategy, like, is at the heart of it all, because Stellantis' leadership insists these decisions are part of a necessary transition toward a green future. But insiders paint a darker picture, one where Stellantis overestimated demand for electric vehicles and now can't afford the consequences. Documents leaked from within the company show that internal projections for Jeep's EV lineup, like the Recon and the Wagoneer S, were far below expectations. In some cases, less than half of the projected sales were achieved in their launch markets. That means billions of dollars in losses, and thousands of jobs sacrificed to balance the books. It's not just the EV models failing, it's the customers rejecting the direction Jeep has taken. Hardcore Jeep fans, the ones who've been loyal for decades, are turning away in frustration. Online forums and social media pages are flooded with angry posts. This isn't the Jeep I grew up with. They're killing the soul of the brand. Dealerships are reporting growing distrust among buyers. Some customers walk into showrooms only to walk right back out when they hear the words electric or battery powered. Others say they'll switch to Ford, Toyota, or even Rivian before buying an EV Jeep. Meanwhile, analysts warn that this could trigger a domino effect across the American auto industry. If Jeep, one of the most recognized names in US automotive history, can fall this hard, then no brand is safe. Suppliers are next. Companies that provide Jeep with parts, materials, and logistics support are now laying off their own workers. The ripple effect is spreading through the Midwest, from Michigan to Illinois, hitting small manufacturing towns that depend on auto contracts to survive. And here's the part Stellantis doesn't want you to hear. Insiders claim that Jeep's decline was planned, that the leadership knew the layoffs and plant closures were coming long before they made the public announcement. Because behind the scenes, Stellantis is preparing a massive shift, one that could move almost all Jeep production out of the US within the next 2 years. That's right, reports suggest that Jeep models will soon be built primarily in Mexico and Europe, while the American plants are either retooled for other brands or permanently shut down. If that happens, the American legend known as Jeep will effectively become a foreign product with an American badge. But the backlash is growing stronger by the day. Union leaders are mobilizing, protesters are gathering outside Stellantis headquarters, even former Jeep executives are speaking out, warning that Stellantis' decisions could destroy not only Jeep, but the trust of American consumers forever. The question now isn't just if Jeep can survive, it's whether America will ever forgive Stellantis for what they've done. Because when you fire thousands of workers, close historic plants, and send American jobs overseas, you're not just ending a brand, you're ending a legacy. And yet, there are whispers of something brewing in response. A massive movement among laid-off Jeep workers, dealerships, and even former engineers determined to fight back and reclaim what they call America's off-road soul. And that rebellion is already taking shape. Across the Midwest, workers who once proudly wore their Jeep badges to the plant every morning are now organizing under a new banner: Take Back American Manufacturing. What started as a small protest in Toledo has turned into a full-blown national movement, spreading through social media, with thousands of laid-off Stellantis employees demanding justice. They're not just calling for their jobs back, they're calling for accountability. They want Stellantis executives in Washington answering tough questions about why American tax incentives were used to build factories overseas while shutting down US plants. They're demanding that Congress step in and protect what little remains of America's America's manufacturing backbone. Union leaders, especially from the UAW, are taking a hard line this time. They've had enough of corporate promises that vanish overnight. One union representative said during a fiery press conference, Stellantis can build its future anywhere it wants, but if it thinks it can abandon American workers without consequences, it's in for the fight of its life. The tone across the country is changing. Politicians who once turned a blind eye to offshoring are suddenly realizing this isn't just another round of layoffs. It's the dismantling of an American symbol. Jeep isn't just any brand, it's part of the national identity. Losing it feels like losing a piece of history. And now, major news outlets are catching on. Headlines everywhere are asking the same question. Is Stellantis leaving America behind? Behind the scenes, pressure is building inside Stellantis' own leadership ranks. According to sources close to the company, some internal executives are beginning to question Carlos Tavares' leadership. They're reportedly worried that the aggressive cost-cutting and EV transition plans are backfiring, not just financially, but publicly. The brand's reputation is collapsing, dealership confidence is falling apart, and loyal Jeep owners are furious. Meanwhile, investors are starting to panic. Stellantis' stock has begun to slide, and analysts are warning that the company's American operations could face long-term damage. In a brutal report, one market analyst stated, Jeep is not just another nameplate for Stellantis. It's their American identity. Losing that trust could destroy their US future. But even as this chaos unfolds, Stellantis continues to double down on its electric vision. They're moving forward with plans for full EV conversion across all brands by the end of the decade, even as the US market shows signs of fatigue toward electric vehicles. And that's where the contradiction lies. Stellantis wants to be seen as the futuristic global EV powerhouse, yet the people who built its most iconic brand are being discarded in the process. On the streets of Toledo, you can see the pain firsthand. Empty parking lots where thousands of cars used to line up every morning. Silent assembly lines that once echoed with the rhythm of production. For many families, Jeep wasn't just a paycheck. It was pride, identity, and heritage. Some former employees are even starting small shops, crafting handmade Jeep memorabilia to keep the spirit alive. Others have turned to social media, creating viral pages with names like Save Jeep America and Bring Back the Wrangler. Within days, these pages have attracted hundreds of thousands of supporters, including veterans, off-road enthusiasts, and lifelong Jeep fans. But Stellantis isn't backing down. Not yet. Insiders claim the company believes this backlash will fade with time, that once the EV lineup launches globally, the noise will die down. But they're wrong, because this time the outrage isn't just about a product, it's about principle. It's about what Jeep stood for: American craftsmanship, reliability, and toughness. And now every Jeep owner, every worker, every small town business that once depended on those factories is asking the same haunting question: how could they do this to us? As the protests grow and the media spotlight intensifies, some lawmakers are beginning to discuss extreme measures, including trade penalties, federal investigations, and even potential intervention to prevent Stellantis from moving certain operations out of the country. Behind closed doors, the pressure is mounting. Sources claim a showdown is looming between Stellantis' top brass and the US government, one that could determine the future of Jeep and the entire American auto industry. Because if Jeep falls, what comes next? Dodge, Chrysler, Ram? How long before every iconic American brand becomes nothing more than a European-owned memory? The fight for Jeep has become more than just a corporate battle. It's turning into a war for America's industrial soul. And while Stellantis executives strategize in their boardrooms overseas, the message from US workers couldn't be clearer. We built Jeep, we made it an icon, and we're not letting it die without a fight. Inside Washington, the tension is thick. Congressional hearings are being scheduled, and subpoenas are being drafted. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, for once, are united in outrage. Jeep's downfall isn't being seen as just a corporate issue anymore. It's being called a national security concern, because when America loses its manufacturing core, it loses its strength, its independence, and its identity. Behind closed doors, there are whispers of classified briefings where officials warn that Stellantis' overseas shift could have long-term consequences, not just for jobs, but for national supply chains. Remember, Jeep wasn't just a car brand. During wars, disasters, and emergencies, Jeep vehicles became symbols of resilience. Now, that symbol is being outsourced to foreign soil. At the heart of the storm, Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares is facing mounting pressure. Reports claim he's been called into emergency meetings with U.S. trade representatives, where he's being grilled about the company's decisions. The U.S. government wants answers, and fast. Sources inside Stellantis describe these meetings as tense and explosive. One official allegedly told Tavares point blank, "You can't take American tax money, fire American workers, and expect us to stay silent." But Stellantis isn't backing down. Instead, the company is doubling down on its justification, claiming that Jeep's EV transition was economically unsustainable in the US due to high labor costs and insufficient EV incentives. In other words, Stellantis is blaming America itself for Jeep's collapse. And that statement has ignited a firestorm. Workers are calling it a slap in the face. Industry leaders are calling it corporate cowardice. And consumers, they're furious. Jeep dealerships across the nation are flooded, not with buyers, but with angry owners demanding clarity about warranties, service, and future parts availability. The backlash is so strong that some Stellantis dealerships are removing Jeep banners from their showrooms altogether. They don't want to be associated with the brand's growing controversy. Others have stopped ordering new Jeep inventory, fearing that the company could dissolve operations in the US completely. Meanwhile, social media has erupted with hashtags like Tax or Save Jeep, Bring Jobs Back, and Boycott Stellantis. What started as frustration has evolved into a full-scale digital rebellion. Influencers, veterans, and even former Jeep engineers are joining the movement, sharing stories, videos, and emotional tributes to the Jeep legacy that once defined America's roads. And as all this unfolds, the US economy feels the ripple. Auto suppliers are laying off workers, tooling companies are shutting down, local contractors who built Jeep plants are filing for bankruptcy. Every lost Jeep job is dragging another small business down with it. But there's something deeper happening, a silent awakening among American consumers. People are realizing that this isn't just about Jeep, it's about who controls America's industries, about how global conglomerates can come in, milk a legacy brand for profit, and walk away when the numbers stop adding up. The anger has spread beyond the Midwest. In Texas, in Georgia, even in California, Jeep owners are gathering in off-road clubs, holding massive meetups under banners that read, "Keep Jeep American." Entire communities that used to celebrate Jeep trails and annual events are turning those gatherings into protests. And now, reports suggest that several US senators are drafting emergency proposals to block Stellantis from receiving future federal contracts or subsidies unless it reinstates American production for Jeep vehicles. Some are even pushing for incentives for new automakers to rise from Jeep's ashes. Brands that could be built entirely in the US by American hands for American roads. It's becoming more than just a fight for one company. It's turning into a movement to reclaim America's industrial power. Meanwhile, inside Stellantis headquarters, executives are reportedly panicking. Leaked emails hint that internal morale has plummeted. Even employees overseas are questioning whether the company's globalization strategy is doing more harm than good. Some insiders are warning that Jeep's collapse could trigger a global backlash against Stellantis, especially in the United States, their largest market. But Tavares remains firm. In a recent statement, he said, "The future is electric. The future is global. We will not be bound by geography." That line sent shockwaves through the industry. To many Americans, it felt like Stellantis was officially saying goodbye, not just to Jeep's workers, but to the country that built the brand in the first place. Yet behind the scenes, a secret meeting is rumored to be taking place. Sources say top US officials, union representatives, and even private investors are discussing a potential American rescue plan, one that could see Jeep spun off from Stellantis and reborn as a fully independent American company once again. It's ambitious, risky, but it might be the only way to save the brand before it disappears forever, because the clock is ticking, factories sit idle, workers are still unemployed, and Jeep's loyal fan base is growing louder by the day, refusing to let one of America's greatest automotive icons fade into history without a fight.